This is titled Not Seeing is Believing. I'm a hunter and worked for the veteran PMEL and worked for the FAA in a few places around the country, CONUS and Alaska. Until I retired, I never had any experiences with these creatures. I, with my son, accidentally walked into a brown bear hunting area on Douglas Island. Excuse me. Never seen it, but there was a large fresh pile of asphalt steaming in an upper muskeg field. We looked around and saw nothing in the rainforest. Hold on a minute, that's a little confusing. Might have been a typo. Let me read that again. I, with my son, accidentally walked into a brown bears hunting area on Douglas Island. Never seen it, but there was a large fresh pile of asphalt steaming in an upper muskeg field. Okay, if it's muskeg, there was an asphalt steaming, so I think the asphalt was a typo. Muskeg would have ate up the truck it would have took to dump the asphalt. We looked around and saw nothing in the rainforest. I had a 454 Castle and an odd 6. My son had a 357 and a 30-30. I knew they were too small and told my son, we'll head back down the mountain. I told my son to go back down the hill as I watched and stood guard until he could have my back. Then I walked slowly towards him as he guarded. As I came up to him, we heard a loud roar from the bear. We never seen it. All right, so basically you're talking about a large pile of shit, for sure. That was a bear, though. We continued that way down the hill until we got to the van and left. Now, our first strange encounter. We moved to Colorado Western Slope. Again, I worked high sites all over the Rockies, here and some in Wyoming. I never saw one. Now retired, I like trail riding on my YZ450 motorcycle. On a ride, my number 2 and I were riding a trail up around 9,500 feet. We were stopping to check out the lake for fishing. After one stop, I couldn't get my bike started and was kicking it over and breathing heavy. I would stop and start, trying to get the bike running. In the meantime, my son stopped down the trail about 100 feet in the front of me waiting. I did a bonehead thing and had choked the bike instead of leaning it out. Well, I get it started and ride past my son about another 50 feet past him by the lake. When he rode up to me, he asked me if I was huffing and sniffing loud. I thought he was talking about me being out of breath. I said, yes. We decided to continue. We both started the bikes at the same time. Then came the scream/roar over both bikes, and with helmets on, it scared us so much. We both booked it up the trail about a half a mile before we stopped to talk. You know how loud those race bikes are, and we felt the roar. I think he was trying to smell my son, but he never took off his helmet and would have smelled like exhaust and motor oil and gas, etc. When we got home, I searched for the sound until I found it. It wasn't the low roar, but high-pitched. The match was a Washington State news call blasting recording of a young Bigfoot for the news crew. The next day, we, my number 1 and number 2, went up armed in a Jeep to see what evidence we could find. We found tracks that showed it was standing right next to my son, sniffing his head. No shit. Tracks also had one of the feet with a split heel. They were only about size 12 to 13 inches in size. That's what I wear. Obviously barefoot. We could see on the lower hill where its toes dug in. We tracked it across the trail to a tree fall. Then I found in the mass a 19-inch track 2 inches deep. Couldn't duplicate it. Up the hill in the timber fall was a log with evidence of a large animal sitting and eating a deer. Bones were all around the log. They sat on the log eating. In the middle of the tree fall was what I call a deer trap. Logs were placed in such a way that it was easy to get in, but not to hop out. It would slow the deer down. Also, right in the middle was the sun shining on grass visible from up the hill. The logs were also in a geometric pattern. They were placed there, as I said. As we further worked our way up the hill, I found they were watching us that morning. Under a bunch of bushes, we could clearly see where they took off in 3 different directions up the hill away. Easy to follow, heavy dew was everywhere, and crushed, trampled foliage. We found further up, aspens snapped at 8 feet to 10 feet up and moved to the open area. Next, there were 2 huge trees, stacked on top of each other, roots on opposite ends of each other. I got behind them, and they were taller than me, and I'm over 6'4", and this was easily 8 feet tall and looked like a hunting blind. We left after my son said he heard voices up the hill. These things are intelligent as hell, and they are capable of invisibility. They have mass while invisible and leave footprints and move objects while they are invisible. I have a theory on how they do it, and it is to do with the infrasound that some people say they hear. If you want more, we have since then run into these things a lot. Please only use my first name. Okay, I don't even need to use your name, man, but if you are still following the channel, you ever want to hear it? You kidding? Send away.